Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian Alexander, and I am with Free the Slaves, the Secretariat for the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Prisons. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Caribbean Connections. And today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Ms. Cherese Ferguson, Country Manager for RET, based in the beautiful country of Belize, our westernmost CARICOM nation. Hello, Cherese. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing well. And you?
I'm fantastic. Had a great weekend, so I am excited to start this new work week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same here.
So tell us a bit about yourself, Cherese. Who is Cherese and how did you become involved in combating human trafficking?
Right. Well, I am a social worker by profession. I've been in the field over 20 years, and I've been involved in different fields of practice, both in Belize and the United States. Um, since in home here in my home country, I've worked with the Ministry of Human Development, done a lot of social development programs focusing on youth, women, some gender aspects, community development. And in 2021, I was fortunate to have been offered a consultancy with IOM, International Organization for Migration here in Belize, to do a training on the protocols for assistance, protection, and support for children um, accompanied and unaccompanied minors. And so it's through that engagement that I became a bit more familiar with the whole topic of migration, the movement of people, as well as the issue of human trafficking. And so after that, I had the opportunity to be engaged with RET International shortly after the previous consultancy I spoke of, and I was hired as the country director um, for it. And the main project at that time was the Safe Belize project um, that primarily focused on human trafficking, working with the shelters in country um, to build their capacity to be better able to provide protective services and wider support services for victims and or survivors of human trafficking, in addition to creating awareness across the country on this matter, and as well within that project to develop a coalition group of CSOs and NGOs in the country to, strengthen our coordination and collaboration and advocacy against this issue. And so that's what that's the path that led me to this work in trafficking and becoming a bit more knowledgeable and involved with NGO, civil service organization um, in the work of trafficking, as well as government entities to combat trafficking. So that's a little history of how I became involved in this sector.
Thanks so much for sharing that with me, Cherese. You mentioned RET, and I see your lovely background, RET. What does it stand for, and how was RET established?
So RET at one point was the trust for the Foundation for Refugee Education Trust. However, over the years, the organization has changed its branding to just RET International. RET is and was founded by Mrs. Sadako Ogata in 2000. And her experience, she previously was engaged with UNHCR. And so her desire to bridge the gaps with regards to vulnerable communities, um, and creating a space for education and knowledge and sustainability in persons in vulnerable situations is what is how RET was born, through her vision. And so over the years, this year, actually, RET will celebrate 25 years in existence. And so the organization has adapted to the changing needs of communities and primarily working with vulnerable populations and their host communities to be able to help them to navigate any challenges that they face, no? So we've worked in diverse communities and diverse interventions, also including sectors like food security, nutrition, vocational training, and education aspect is always part of our interventions, no? To build capacities of individuals, because through capacity development, that's what helps with sustainability. Of course, right? Like any other NGO, interventions are not meant to be done for dependency, but however, to allow persons, to give them the tools and skills and knowledge needed for them to then, bounce back and also be able to be sustainable, self-sustainable after the intervention. So the core mission of the organization continues to be alleviating suffering and promoting sustainable development in crisis, conflicts, and fragile contexts.
Okay, that's great. So you said RET is international.
It's an international organization. So we have currently about, we're active in 15 countries across Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, Asia.
Okay. It's great to know that you're functioning within what we would call Caribbean. Yeah?
Yes, yes.
So what are RET's main activities in the Caribbean region?
In the Caribbean region, the main activities have been focused around disaster risk management, several efforts in that area, and looking at the supporting and facilitating plans for the disasters and how to mitigate those, and then responding to the effects of any disasters that occur. So that has been one of the primary focus areas, in the region.
Okay, and in Belize, it's the only country where the counter-trafficking work of RET has been taking place.
Yes, so while the area of disaster risk management is a promising or potential area moving forward, in Belize to adopt some of the practices and lessons learned from their experience in the region. In Belize, we have focused on three main areas, looking at democracy and governance. So where we did some initiatives in youth empowerment, youth leadership in rural communities primarily. We also had interventions looking at economic growth and development, where we did some entrepreneurial and initiatives that promoted business development, entrepreneurship, vocational training. So allowing persons to, gain skills, whether they were dropped out, high school dropouts or school dropouts, or just individuals wanting to build their capacity in another area. And then lastly, we've also intervened in areas of protection, focusing initiatives that created awareness, looking at awareness and increased access to services, especially looking at issues of gender-based violence, human trafficking, child protection, and working with vulnerable populations in their host communities. So those have been the three primary areas of focus in these: democracy and governance, business development or economic growth and development, sorry, and then protection.
Okay. So you've been
And in
working with
Belize this year, we celebrate 10 years
10
in
years in
Belize. It's
Belize.
been in
Okay,
Belize since 2015.
great. So this is a landmark occasion, a wonderful
Yes, it
anniversary for
surely
you.
is.
10 years of the Sustainable Development Goals, 10 years of
Mhm.
RET working in Belize, and of course,
Right.
you're under your leadership. So that's
Mhm.
great. So over the last 10 years, what would you think are the four most impactful achievements of
Mhm.
RET in Belize? Things that, would be like legacy accomplishments.
Months in the country. So I spoke of the work with youth and youth empowerment and leadership. And through that initiative, there was a development of a guidance document for formation of in-school youth leadership groups. Um, so I think that was one of our important achievements, being able to establish a group or some initiative, but creating a document or a tool that can be used beyond the life of the project is always a plus. And so that I think was key. We also had the experience of developing an SOP for shelters and other means of accommodations, standard operating procedures for shelters for victims of trafficking. Again, another a strong resource and tool to be used by the government and or NGOs, because in our situation in Belize, the the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Council leads the mandate in all anti-trafficking efforts. However, they're supported by the work of NGOs and CSOs in the country. And so a lot of our shelters that are here are NGOs, it's not government run. And so through this SOP is a way of strengthening that collaboration with both entities, government and CSO. We've also been successful in doing advocacy and public awareness campaigns. We had one on the timely, transparent response to violence and trafficking in persons. And lastly, I would say the formation of the coalition group, the HT coalition group that was recently formed in 2022. And the aim was to, bring a group of organizations together to strengthen our voice and our work in bringing awareness, in sharing experiences on the ground when it comes to working with victims and survivors, ensuring the the provision of holistic services needed by these survivors, and also being that voice to the government of challenges that we see in the in this area, areas for improvement, and where we can strengthen our efforts all around in the 4 Ps: protection, prevention, prosecution, and through our work and our collaboration, of course, we strengthen the partnerships as well. So I would say those are our 4 main achievements.
Oh, those sound like great achievements. I want to take you a little further into telling us about the coalition, though. I mean, very,
Mhm.
very interested. As you know, the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking Persons looks at this at a regional level. So I'd love to hear
Mhm.
more about the work that you've done through the coalition at a
Mhm.
national level. So it's like
Mhm.
membership participation, that sort of thing.
So the membership is about 13 or 14 organizations um, that bring different expertise and strength. Some who have been involved in sexual and reproductive health component or areas. Others working primarily with women and girls in building capacity, helping them to change the narrative when it comes to gender-based violence and issues of violence on a whole, not just in the families and communities. Others that primarily focus on trafficking work, but some of the shelters as well. There are all the shelters I've been a part of, others that have worked with vulnerable populations, including migrants. And so with the expertise, there's overlap and interconnectedness with the work of these agencies and the having some interaction or need when it comes to human trafficking. And so since its formulation, there was the creation of an action plan through which we charted out, the activities that we plan to do. And it was a year by year. So this was the second year of the group. And we've done advocacy with the tourism industry, with the health industry, kept the ATIPS Council in the know of the work that we're doing, working with them to see where, in response to the TIP report, and the areas of recommendation where CSOs can lend that support to the government, strengthening our efforts there so that nationally, hopefully we can move up in the ranking. We've also done some awareness activities in partnering to do walkathons in different locations in the country to bring about that awareness about trafficking. And we involve other entities, we involve youth, young people, and try to align it with the theme each year for World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. We've also had intervention, well, not interventions, but discussions with the immigration department here as well. So the goal is always to look at each entity, main government entity that's involved in the response mechanism when it comes to trafficking, and sharing our experiences on the ground, and so where we can influence policy changes or influence changes in how work is done. Also, like I said, the SOPs were created, and that can be used as a tool as well for government to classify the different shelters, which ones are more fit to be emergency type shelters versus short-term or long-term care. So it's incremental steps that we've taken over the 2 years, and to build that collaboration, that networking, and the influence that we have on the government as far as, improved policies and improved interventions when it comes to trafficking, or even just bringing greater awareness, helping the government to do trainings and capacity workshops and outreach activities, because there's always going to be movement of people. So in the government departments or different entities, communities, persons, transfer to different departments, or they might migrate to different areas. And so for new staff coming in, it's always that need for, creating awareness and updating. Persons might have gotten trained 2 years ago, but there might have been changes in policies, changes in the trends that we're seeing in the country. So awareness is an ongoing activity. We can't take it for granted that, we've done training on that area before, move on to the next topic. There's always, to reinforce, going into schools. We have maybe young persons. Sometimes I think in the country, think of trafficking as an external thing or just migrants coming into the country and maybe being taken advantage of. However, we have where Belizeans might see promising, job opportunities or so forth, and they leave the country in pursuit of better, and then might find themselves in a trafficking situation outside of the country. So bringing that awareness is not just for the conditions in country, but how to protect themselves, protect others, our own, when they too seek, better opportunities, or something might be too good, like come across as, too good to be true. So that awareness helps persons, and even with some of the one intervention we did in RET with the transportation sector, with taxi drivers, bus drivers, conductors, it brings that awareness again, why that's a industry that can be exploited to move people, so that awareness really can help with reporting. If we see something, someone might be more empowered to say something, and also can maybe contribute to our efforts in prosecution. So a lot of times people don't share or don't want to report because of lack of knowledge or ignorance to information. And so it's these type of activities and engagements that the coalition seeks to amplify for an improved response to trafficking in Belize.
Okay, that is great. I love the fact that the coalition in 2 years has been able to accomplish so much and has, of course, garnered the respect of not only other CSOs, but the state apparatus to be able to provide training for them and so on. So that's definitely kudos to you and to your leadership and to RET International. But now that we're in 2025, 25 years of RET's existence and 10 years since RET entered Belize, what do you think lies ahead for RET in terms of its plans to expand its presence and its anti-trafficking efforts in the Caribbean?
So as far as our work in the Caribbean, RET plans to continue to be active, to be present, focus on activities and interventions that aligns with security, aligns with the needs of vulnerable populations, bridging gaps between communities, and services or access, to services, and using lessons learned and best practices from other countries or in the various countries to then fully replicate certain programs and interventions in other countries. Like I mentioned earlier, the work in comprehensive disaster risk management is an area that there's plans to, implement in Belize, while the work and the lessons being learned through our work in human trafficking could definitely be adopted in one of our other Latin American Caribbean countries. So always just leveraging the work that's being done in different areas and then seeing how best that can apply in another country of, dealing with these type of social issues and challenges. It's never a cookie cutter solution, So utilizing the lessons learned in one area doesn't mean that you just take exactly what you did in one country and implement it in another. We have to look at the dynamics of that country, the demographics, the culture, to determine adequately what would work best in another region, but definitely can utilize the tools that's been developed, like these guidance documents and so on. Again, adapting it to the situation in another region, in a particular country, to get the best results. And so we also, in all our interventions, RET thrives on building partnerships with government, partnerships with other NGOs and CSOs, and other IFIs and prominent entities in countries for Belize, IOM, UNICEF, UNHCR, continuing to forge those partnerships and relationships, because it's through that you were able to better network, able to fill the gaps, because we tend to, not we RET, but as human beings or as organizations, sometimes we a lot of times we might be competing for same resources. So building through these partnerships, we're able to look at what each person, what each entity, brings to the table, what each entity is strong at, and then we rely on those strengths. So while RET maybe focus on trafficking and working directly with the shelters, maybe another entity would, and we're working to build capacity. We're not providing shelter services, so we're helping in that aspect, while the shelters then would enhance their service offerings, to better provide care there, or through the work of ATIPS and another entity working with the police department and the immigration department, then that can strengthen the efforts in prosecution, or protection areas. So it's always just looking at the whole picture and not working in isolation. So RET, we like I said, we thrive on the partnerships that we form, and we aim to continue to maintain that in whatever area of work we do, whether it's disaster risk, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's other areas of protection. We'll keep that up the forefront, delivering services to those vulnerable populations, bridging the gaps, and creating a space for improvement, for development, to help with persons to be resilient.
Okay. That's an excellent vision. And the Caribbean is wide open for that type of expertise. Definitely, I look forward to hearing more of RET expansion in the English-speaking Caribbean. Yeah. Cherese, thank you so very much for taking the time to have this chat with me and to share with our viewers on Caribbean Connection some of the work being done in Belize. You don't often hear very much about Belize in terms of the anti-trafficking space. I know for a few years, much of the work would have been, or at least the information, would have surrounded the work of the Human Trafficking Institute and its work with the government there. So it's great to be able to touch base with you and RET and to get a sense of what's been happening with some of the other organizations, especially within the ambit of the Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, as you mentioned.
And also just, that continuing to partner with the ATIPS Council. Like I said, they are the main ones, the mandate, but they cannot do it alone, no? So in partnership with us, RET, CDF, other, PFLA, other entities, then that will strengthen the overall efforts and interventions done in the country.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Cherese. And
thank you.
We are going to be having a virtual anti-trafficking conference this year. For the past couple of years with the Freedom from Slavery Forum. We've had it in person in Trinidad in 2023 and in Jamaica last year. So this year through the coalition, we'll be doing a virtual one. So I look forward to touching
What date is that?
That will be in the month of July.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll touch base with you and see how we can get RET involved so that we can learn from what RET is doing and what others are doing in Belize. We can't leave Belize out. Not at all.
Sure.
So thanks so much again, Cherese, and
Thank you
thank you,
too.
our viewers, for tuning in to another episode of Caribbean Connections. Definitely peruse our YouTube channel. There's so many other clips there and videos, not only for Caribbean Connections, but also for other podcast series, Member Spotlight. Until the next time, I'm Adrian Alexander saying thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.